Star Wars is an interesting cultural entity at this point. There are, of course, the original movies, which have become sort of ineffable cornerstones of our media that stand above criticism and are seen as necessary historical pieces. Then there are the prequels, which are almost universally reviled. Well, I say that, but it's more like there's bands of ability for opinion. You get the lowest level where people blindly enjoy them without understanding the fundamental issues. Then you get a huge breadth of people who understand movies enough to see the problems, and everyone in this segment seems to hate the things, or at least they do after Plinkett, and then you get the more dedicated sorts, who've read all the books and have trawled through the Wikia and all of that jazz, and here you start to see opinions diverge again. And, of course, you've got the new Star Wars movies, with all sorts of directors helming films and Disney holding the leash. These are controversial, I think. I mean, everybody seems to be watching them, and a whole lot of people seem to be angry about them, and you know what, we'll save this for a little bit. What I want to do first is tell you a story. A story of one of my favourite Star Wars characters. It's not a major one like Han or Luke or Obi-Wan or Anakin, it's certainly not Rey, it's not even Boba Fett, though their stories cross over. The character I want to discuss is this fella. This is Dahahan. His head is an artillery cannon, and that's pretty cool. He's got this kinda tragic backstory where his race was getting wrecked by some worm guys and he volunteered to become like an artillery head cyborg dude, but they lost the war anyway and the whole race is basically dead now and he's maybe the only one left and he's a messed up artillery head man, so that's all sad for him. And he's a bounty hunter and that's cool because Star Wars, and we all love the bounty hunters out of Star Wars, and his gunhead tracks people automatically and that's super cool and evocative, and he teams up with Boba Fett in the Bounty Hunter Wars, and that's like 3 layers of cool, all mashed together. And there's a betrayal, and Boba Fett uses his head gun as a gun, and that's so stupid, but so awesome. And Dahahan dies in Boba Fett's arms, and it's all the real emotions couched in such dumb, silly, fantastic goofiness, and god damn, it is perfect. And none of it is canon. Rey is canon, but Dahahan isn't. Alright, back to the bantha in the room. The new Disney Star Wars films, I don't like them. Not a fan myself. Now, if you enjoy them, more power to you, but I don't like them. Now, people have made videos explaining issues with these things to an exhaustive extent, so I'm not going to get into any nitty-gritty. The only problem I have with them that matters is their extensive retconning of the Star Wars setting. See, I'm a guy who likes setting. I enjoy a huge, expansive universe full of history and details. I mean, I'm a 40k guy, so this probably isn't news to any of my subscribers. But see, there's 2 main ways to make stakes feel important. One is if you care about the characters and how victory or loss will impact them, and the other is if you care about the universe and world of a thing, and how the events in a story will affect it. Now, the Disney movies have, not invested me in the characters, but more significantly than that, what exists of the setting seems totally abstracted. There's no sense of scale or cause and effect. Blowing up Starkiller Base seemed to have no economic ramifications on the First Order, a group that should have been on the back foot from the start, whereas the Resistance, which is such a blatant and stupid name since they're ostensibly the ones in power, lack anything that really differentiates them from the rebellion of the original trilogy, though, let's be real, this was by design. These aren't proper factions in a fleshed out setting, they're hollow agents of a plot used to create a synthetic sense of nostalgia or being contorted to fit the whims of whichever director happens to be in charge at the time. Alright, enough complaining about movies, let's switch to talking about the prequels. Now, these films, on their own merits and in my opinion, aren't good. Bad writing, inconsistent visuals, and pretty fundamentally flawed stories, but you know what? I like them. Not as movies, on that level I think they fail, but as setting pieces, as vessels for ideas, as seeds for developing a universe, I love these pieces of crap. Because they were the foundation of some of the very best work to come from Star Wars, from things like the minutiae of all the droid manufacturers that I just can't help myself from loving, to all the little stories of the Clone Wars, to even things as big as the realization of the setting being cyclical in nature.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
These things may not redeem the prequels as works of art in a vacuum, but they don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in a universe. But that universe, that galaxy, far, far away, is one that Disney made a whole lot smaller. Now, I understand why they did it. Stories had already been told about what happens next, and it would have been dumb to impossible for dozens of reasons to attempt building the films Disney would make around the books. Furthermore, the rest of the expanded universe was so comprehensive, so labyrinthine, that they would have inevitably started running into the tangle as soon as they tried to write anything if they wanted to respect the old lore fully. So they chose to take the easy road. Deleting it all meant a clean slate. More so, it was the safe road. All that lore was anything if easy to digest for a mass market. Packaging that kind of thing into a consumable product takes effort and talent. Better just to amputate it and toss it in the trash compactor. And to be fair, there was a lot of trash in the expanded universe. For every Grand Admiral Thrawn, there was a Starkiller. For every tragic bit of General Grievous's backstory, there was a dumb design flaw in Vader's suit. For every interesting model of droid used by the Confederacy of Independent Systems, there was a set of zombie stormtroopers. For every Cad Bane, there was an Inquisitor flying about on a helicopter whirly saber, and for every Kreia, there was a Yuuzhan Vong invasion. But here's the thing, if you liked any of that cool stuff I mentioned, whenever you thought about it, you probably weren't thinking about all the garbage in there. If you were anything like me and got a little annoyed when JJ and the Mouse deleted everything, you probably weren't sad about the loss of the Yuuzhan Vong and their amazing stories, like the one where Lando Calrissian built Terminators to fight them. If you care about Star Wars, you only care about a certain subset of it. To you, that subset is Star Wars. Or maybe it was, but now it's gone after Disney purged it. But think about that. You never considered this canon. This was never what Star Wars was to you. So, here's the way I see things. If you could pick and choose whether this was canon, then why can't you pick and choose whether this is canon over this? A bit wishy-washy, I know, but your alternative is swallowing another Star Wars movie every year that keeps on making the setting more and more hollow while the IP is equally sucked dry of all value in the box office. So, if you don't like the Disney movies, screw 'em. They didn't happen. If you do like them, then more power to you. Hell, you get more of a thing you enjoy every year. Nothing wrong with that at all. But if you prefer a setting with Dahahan than a setting with Snoke, then bloody hell, that is what Star Wars is. Before Disney came along, there was a side of Star Wars that was Star Wars to you. If you prefer the Shattered Empire and the Thrawn trilogy to the stories of Rey and Finn, then that's what happened. If you don't like the Yuuzhan Vong on the end of that, don't stress it. Never happened. Not in your Star Wars. If you like General Grievous as a dirtbag who kept on getting cybernetic limbs until he ended up a robot man, then swell, it happened. If you prefer him having a tragic story that added nuance to the moral actions of the Jedi and intrigue to the dealings of the Sith, then that's the canon that matters. If you like Star Wars as a pulpy sci-fi story that was self-contained and brilliantly told, then that's fine. The original trilogy is all Star Wars needs to be for you. If you liked it as a series of fun enough movies, then all the movies are canon. Disney will put out another product for you within the year. But if you liked Star Wars as a vast universe, filled with hundreds of fleshed out characters, tracts of minutiae, a grand history of powers rising and falling, and cyclical themes spanning the entire body of this Leviathan work, then it doesn't have to stop being that. Only downside is there probably won't be any more content for this side of Star Wars. But you know what? That's okay. Things don't need to be dragged out forever. It's hard to keep bringing soul to something year after year, especially when it grows so far beyond a single person's vision. Even before Disney, the EU was already retconning over itself regularly, but even beyond all that, everything dies eventually. We've gotten a whole lot of stories out of the Star Wars setting, a damn lot more than most give us. When we're fortunate enough to see a setting like Star Wars get an excess of stories, at some point, sometimes, it's still best to say that enough is enough. The side of Star Wars that I like, well, the best part of that may have been how much room for stories there was. Stories like the moral crisis the Death Star's chief gunnery officer went through, like General Grievous's life before he became the biomechanical monster we see, or even like Dahahan's tale. God, there would be room for so many more stories. But nothing lasts forever. Trying to drag it past the point of death, that isn't good for anybody. Or if you don't like my way of thinking, you can keep watching the Disney movies and hating them. That's fine too. I didn't watch The Last Jedi. What can I say? My heart couldn't take seeing Mark Hamill put through that pain. But if you can accept the ideas of some internet weirdo acting too big for his own britches, then I'd recommend you check out a few things that present some of my favourite sides of Star Wars. First is the philosophy of Kreia. There's a good chance you've already seen this video, but if you haven't, then not only does it go deep into analysing one of the best written characters in all of the video game industry, and the entirety of Star Wars, but it also explains the nature of the setting from the perspective of it being a cyclical narrative. It's long, but it is absolutely worth the time. Also, I'm friends with the guy who made it, and he was a pretty significant factor in me wanting to make this little thing. Next is Lawrunner and his rumination analysis videos on the prequels. If you want a perspective that shows those films in a much more positive light than you get from the zeitgeist, they do a damn fine job of it. Even more of a time investment than the last thing, but if you want pretty much everything interesting from those films unpacked, those videos do a damn fine job of it. Oh, and he has ones on the original trilogy which are great too and equally worth consuming. Last of all is something smaller, a comic called The Eyes of Revolution. This little 14-page read is some of the tightest, most stylish, and most emotionally impactful setting and character building out there for Star Wars. You know, it's funny, I used to be really into General Grievous. I mean, I've always had a thing for the cyborg stuff, the whole AdMech thing I've got going is proof enough of that, but thinking back, Star Wars may have been one of the things that kickstarted that for me, and since the AdMech stuff is the main thing that got me so deep into 40k, ain't that strange to think about?
Just one more song, friend, and then so long, friend. The nights get shorter, it seems. Just one more rhyme, friend. Yes, it's a crime, friend. But you know time, friend, time can fly. So it's good night, friend. Good night.